We have spoken a lot about the laws of Shabbos, specifically the prohibitions, what you cannot do. Spoken about what a malacha is. We've spoken about why it's so important to have so many details, and in a certain sense, the reverence and sometimes even the love that those laws are supposed to engender. But I get the sneaking suspicion that we are getting a little bit bogged down in the no-no-nos. And so what I'd like to do this class and the next few classes is to start to empower ourselves. What is the positive side of all of this? What are we meant to do now that we know that we're not doing a whole lot of things? So what is that supposed to allow us to do? What are we meant to use in the space that we create with all the prohibitions of Shabbos? You guys know what I'm saying? We've cleared the playing field. We know we can't cook and we can't clean and we can't color and we can't grind. So now what are we supposed to do? Sit around and play Monopoly, maybe. Okay, well, if it creates a relationship with your family, then maybe play Monopoly. Although Monopoly usually ends in tears, so maybe find a different game. But now what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at the positive side of Shabbos. So there are two sets of commandments, Aseres Adibros. One of them is said in Parshas Yisro, and the other one in Parshas in Sefer. No, Devarim and Sefer Devarim in Parshas Ve'eschanan. So there's two sets of Dibros, and for those who pay close attention, sometimes those two sets of Dibros are not always aligned. Sometimes they are not always saying the same thing. A very notable example, is when it comes to the commandment of Shabbos. In Parshas Yisro, it says, what does it say? What's the commandment of Shabbos in Parshas Yisro? Not quite. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Zachor. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Okay, and we'll talk about what it means to remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. And in Parshas Devarim, it says, in Sefer Devarim, Parshas Ve'eschanan, it says, Shamor es Yom HaShabbos l'Kadosho. Guard the Sabbath to keep it holy. You've heard this before? Two different words, remember and guard. In Sefer Shmos, it says remember. And in Sefer Devarim, it says guard, Shmor.
How is that put together?
So the Gemara says, the Medrash says, that Shamor and Zachor was said in the same moment. God said them equally at the same time. But of course, in this physical world of human beings, we can only hear one thing at the same time. And so we split them into two different Dibros, but really Hashem said, Shamor Zachor, right? Zachor Shamor, in the same moment, in the same instance. And what does this mean? What is this teaching us, other than God knows how to do things that humans can't? Is that there are two sides to the same coin. Is that to the extent that we are able to keep the Shamor, that's how much we can keep the Zachor. To the extent that we are able to stay away from what we're not meant to do, that's the flip side of being able to do the positive things that we should be doing. So today, after we've spent a long time dealing with Shamor, what we're not supposed to do, let's talk about Zachor. Let's talk about what is the mitzvah of Zachor, remembering the Sabbath to keep it holy. Yes, bracha.
Never mind.
Okay.
Specification which one Shamar and Zachor is that you just said.
Great, fantastic. Zachor is an active thing. You have to actively remember. Shamor is to guard against doing something else. So we're going to talk about the mitzvah of remembering the Sabbath. Does anyone know when we do the mitzvah, without looking at the title of this source sheet? What? Kiddush. Kiddush on Friday night is the embodiment of the mitzvah, the fourth commandment, to remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Now, all of you are 3 steps ahead of me, and you're all asking, what on earth does drinking wine have to do with remembering the Sabbath to keep it holy? That is going to be the subject of today's discussion. Hooray! So we're going to talk about Kiddush. I think Kiddush is just a great mitzvah. We should be telling lots of people to make Kiddush. What? You want this to be this should be a very hands-on, experiential class. We should actually be experiencing Kiddush as we talk about Kiddush. Okay, I'll ask Rabbi K what he thinks about that idea, and we'll see if he agrees. All right,
one from the same as
So we see in Sefer Shmos in Parshas Yisro, Zachor es Yom HaShabbos the Kaddisho. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. That is the mitzvah. That's the mitzvah. Now, what is the mitzvah? As you all know, it's to make Kiddush. But of course, how did we get there? How do we go from remembering the Sabbath to keep it holy to drinking a glass of wine? So the answer to that can be found in the oral Torah. In the Gemara in Psachim 106a, it says, Zachor es Yom HaShabbos HaKaddisho, Zachorehu al Hayayin. You must remember it over wine. Now, the simple understanding of this is that most mitzvahs, most things that we are asked to do, has to have some sort of a physical representation, right? We are not floating bodies. We are human beings in a flesh and blood world. And so whenever we're doing a mitzvah that requires us to think or feel a certain way, we almost always have to do some sort of a physical action to capture it, to embody it. Yes? There's an understanding that human beings, that the reason why we exist in this world, why a soul is put into a body, is not for the sake of the soul. Souls are great. They're fine. They're perfect. They're part piece of God. So the real reason why we're in this world is to perfect the body. The reason, by the way, it's very interesting. At the creation of Adam, it says he took the dirt, right? And then he blew a soul into it. And he named him Adam, after the ground. Now, why didn't he name him after Neshama? You should have named him Neshem, after the Neshama, right? Well, I don't know. If you go read Derech Hashem, it sounds as if while Adam and Chava were in the state of the Garden of Eden before the Chet, they were more soul than body. So all the more reason to call human beings soul. Why are they called dirt? Ever thought of this? It's a very, very interesting way that God names people. Why are humans called after dirt? Why not soul? We're part body, part soul. What's the answer?
Well, I don't know if this is the right answer, but
take a yes.
like personally, I think if you were called soul and then you were like initially like put as soul, I don't think that there would be a purpose to being in this world.
Okay, good. Ariella is touching on the fundamental point here, which is if we're trying to figure out a name, it represents somebody's essence. It represents who we are and what our purpose is. So in the same way, for example, when Moshe is called Moshe because, right, Batia says he was drawn out of the water, right? Ki minamaya mishisihu. Now, if you wanted to name somebody he was drawn out, it would be Mashu, Moshe, something like that. Moshe means he will draw out. He draws out. Now, why on earth would we call somebody who's drawn out of the water, he will draw out? The answer is because we're not talking about what happened to him when he was a baby. We're going to talk about him, what he's going to do when he's an adult. He will draw out the rest of the Jewish people from Mitzrayim. So when we are called Adam, what Hashem is really saying to you is, it's all very well and good that you have a soul, but you know what? Your soul is doing great. Your soul is absolutely fine. Your soul doesn't need fixing up. What really needs fixing is your body. Your body is this undeveloped mass of clay, which needs to be taught to do the right thing and to get on board with the soul. It's like a buddy movie, right? There's like, there's like a, there was this movie from the 70s called The Frisco Kid. I would recommend. This rabbi from Eastern Europe is sent in the 1800s to California to go be the rabbi of the brand new pioneer town in California. And on the way there, he ends up befriending a train robber who is Harrison Ford. So it's Gene Wilder and Harrison Ford, brilliant acting comedic duo. And they have to kind of get to California together. And you have one guy who's the good guy who there's this one scene, it's amazing. They're running away from the bad guys. They're actually on horseback. And the rabbi says, the sun is setting. It's Friday afternoon. I have to get off my horse. And Harrison Ford's like, what are you, nuts? They're chasing us. They're going to kill us. They're going to get us. He's like, I'm sorry, it's Shabbat. I can't do it. So they get off the horse and they wait. And then they wait a whole day. And then as the sun is slowly setting on Saturday night, they're like, is it time yet? No. Is it time yet? No. Is it time yet? No. And then it's dark and it's like, okay, we can get on the horse. So it's an incredible scene, just like in a massive Kiddush Hashem. They don't make pro-Jewish movies like that anymore. But you have your body and soul are kind of like this odd couple. One of them's always trying to, be the goody two-shoes. And the other one is always interested in candy bars or people of the opposite sex. And it's like, you have to like teach that person, like, okay, you are a body, you're slow, you're lazy, you're instinctual, you're hungry all the time. But come on, we're going to get you on board. We're going to get you to love mitzvahs. So the reason why we're called Adam is because that's our tafkid, that's our purpose. Our function is to elevate the body. It's to elevate the physical parts of us. And that's really what we're here to do. So when we're talking about mitzvahs, it doesn't do us that much good if the mitzvah remains in the realm of the intellect. We almost always want the mitzvah to have an impact on the body. So Hashem says, I want you to remember the exodus from Egypt. How are you going to do that? Food. I want you to stuff crackers in your mouth all night so that you can remember food. Right? I want you to remember how much you and I love each other and how much I cared for you in the desert. Go sit in a sukkah. Yeah, it's not enough just to think about it. I want you to actually physically represent that. So that's what we do. That's what we do as Jews. So the same thing is true with just remembering. We don't want to just say, oh, hey, I remember it's Shabbos. Hey, it's Shabbos. We want to remember it on something. But of course, the big question is going to be, what's the big question?
What?
Why? Why are we using wine to remember the Sabbath? And if you think about it even for half a second, it's like, that would probably be the last thing I would use to remember anything. Usually you drink because you want to forget. So why are we using an alcoholic beverage to remember Shabbos? That's going to be the question. What does wine have to do with memory? It's like, you have to imagine, the rabbis were thinking about this very, very hard. They saw something deep and perfect and beautiful. And they said, when I think of remembering something, there's only one way that we could capture this, and that would be wine. And we're standing here thousands of years later being like, excuse me, do you know what wine does? Okay. Take a look at Tosfos. Tosfos is one of the commentaries on the Gemara, under source number 2. Tosfos tries to attempt to answer this question. He says, what does wine have to do with remembering? Remembering is written regarding wine. Because in the Navi Hosea, it says, its remembrance is like the wine of Lebanon. And in Shir Hashirim, it says, we will remember your love more than wine. Okay, thanks. I guess that helped then. We've seen 2 psukim where the word remember and the word wine are in the same sentence. Good. There must be some obvious connection between remembering and wine. So I don't know, if you're like me, we're still in the dark at this point. Okay, so let's try to uncover the clues and figure out, what does drinking wine have to do with remembering Shabbos, and how can that help us to understand what is the positive aspect of what we're meant to be doing on Shabbos that is the counterpart to all the things that we're not meant to be doing on Shabbos. Okay, so question number 1 might be, well, what does wine do? What does wine do? Besides make you drunk. What does wine do? Relaxing, maybe. So many people don't realize this, but alcohol is not a stimulant. It's a depressant, which means that it actually is supposed to make you more mellow. The thing is that sometimes depressants, depending on the mood, can make you more hyper, but yeah. If you drink too much, you can go to sleep. What else does it do? Yeah. Celebrations, great. Let's make a l'chaim. Something good happened. So we intuitively understand that alcohol does something to, let's say, enhance whatever mood we're in, right? The pasuk in Tehillim says, Yayin yismach levav enosh. Wine makes happy the heart of humans. So there's a certain understanding that wine kind of opens us up. It makes us a little bit more open to the moment. We can let our guard down, right? We know sometimes wine helps us to kind of get in the vibe. So if we're having a good time, let's drink some wine and we'll have an even better time. Of course, sometimes it does the opposite. If you're sad, you want to drown your sorrows. But usually wine is there, at least in moderation, to give us a little sense of joy. And speaking of which, we're a couple weeks away from the ultimate day of Simcha, which clearly goes hand in hand with drinking wine. Okay, great, fantastic. So number one is, we know that wine enhances, it makes us gladder, it does something emotionally to us. Now, what about the wine itself? There's an interesting Talmud Yerushalmi, which is brought in halacha, which is that it is a mitzvah to fulfill Kiddush with red wine. So optimally, you want to drink red wine with Kiddush. You are Yotzi, you'd have fulfilled your obligation if you use white wine, but for some reason, red wine is better. Now, in the previous class, we talked about the Aleph Beis and its deep hidden meanings. There are deep and hidden meanings to colors. And one day, when I have enough time on my hands, I'm going to write a book of Jewish feng shui and talk about all the different meaning behind colors and shapes. And the Talmud even talks about certain arrangements of furniture that are optimal and ideal. So where you should place your bed, north to south and not east to west, things like that.
I was also telling you that.
Yeah.
So once I placed it by the door, and she got so upset.
Yeah, there you go. So what does red represent? Anyone know what red represents? Blood, anger, right? So these things we know kind of from mythology and popular culture. So there's blood, there's we know the Greek god Ares and Mars. Mars is the red planet. That's why they called it that. It represents anger, bloodshed, if anybody here is familiar with any of the Kabbalistic stuff. So red always represents the side of gevura, restraint, holding back. Anyone here ever do black and white photography? It was so sad. When I was growing up, I did photography through 5 years of high school. And in ninth grade, our school built a brand new state-of-the-art darkroom. So if you don't know, the way that we used to take pictures was with film, and it was this light-sensitive film. And you'd take a roll of film, and then you'd develop the film in certain chemicals, and that was what would make the silver halide crystals turn into something darker and lighter. And then you would project that little piece of film onto light-sensitive paper, and that's how you'd make a print. And you basically needed an entire room that had no visible light. You could only use certain types of amber light or UV light and stuff like that in order to be able to see, because otherwise it would mess up the paper, because the paper is sensitive to light. Now, so I did this through high school, and about 4 years after I graduated, that darkroom became obsolete, because at that point in the early 2010s, digital photography, at a certain point, the pixels got better than the grain that was on the film. So you could now have the incredible ability to manipulate your images. You wouldn't need any darkroom, you wouldn't need any chemicals, and the quality would be better than grain. There's still some purists out there today who use rolls of film, but it was very interesting that way. Why am I talking about this? Because if anybody's ever done black and white photography, the darkest color that shows up in black and white is red. Red is the shortest wavelength of the visible light spectrum. Can someone just check that for me? It's the shortest wavelength, right? Which means that it lets the least amount of white light in on the entire visible spectrum. So we intuitively understand that red means holding back. Where do we see this? All over countries, everywhere we go, that red means holding back. Stop signs, red lights. Every culture understands that a red light means stop. It means hold back. So there's something about red light which represents restraint. Red, the color red meaning restraint. By the way, that has to do with the red string and the ayin hara, but we're not going to get into that. Okay? So, what do we know so far? we remember the Sabbath with wine. Wine gladdens our hearts, and it's supposed to be red, ideally. What else? The Mishnah Berurah brings another halacha that says you may use freshly pressed wine, i.e. grape juice. However, it is the optimal mitzvah with old wine, that is, it has already aged for 40 days. So, lichatchila, ideally, don't tell your parents, but you are supposed to drink alcoholic wine. It's a better fulfillment of the mitzvah than drinking grape juice. There is one opinion, Rav Elyashiv, who says that actually you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah on grape juice. But most opinions disagree and say that you are yotzi with grape juice.
That even tea is better than grape juice.
Who does?
We do.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, because it's better than natural. Like grape juice isn't wine, and so if it's a random drink, you may as well do it like this stuff.
Yes, he actually says the reason why is because our grape juices today will never become wine. It will never become wine. Back then, you were allowed to drink fresh grape juice because eventually, if you let it sit long enough, it will become wine, and so therefore the potential for it to become wine is there. But today, there's so many preservatives and stuff in the grape juice that it will never ferment.
If you don't have wine, you use like the natural drink of the country. So
That's right. So you can use tea, you can use Coke. Some people say might be a chashuv enough drink to be able to make Kiddush on Coke. Yeah. Yes.
Could another reason be because wine, like if you drink enough of it, it can poison you, so that it's kind of like.
Well, nobody says that you should be drinking so much wine that it can poison you. But the optimal thing to do, we are I'm just going to say this outright, okay? The Torah is pro-drugs. We see it right here. We are not anti-substances. There are lots of religions. Mormons can't even drink caffeine, let alone alcohol. Muslims don't drink alcohol. There are a lot of religions out there that say no drugs, no substances. They're evil. As Jews, our philosophy is almost everything in the natural world has some positive purpose. Unless explicitly stated, Hashem says, I'm sorry, but in this lifetime, you will never be able to elevate a pig. So it's just not going to happen. Maybe one day, if you are so ill that it's a life and death situation and the only thing you can possibly eat is pork, then you can eat it permissively. But other than that, there's no way to elevate pig. But everything else, there's got to be some positive use for it. Otherwise, Hashem wouldn't have put it in the world. God's good. He likes us. He puts things in the world that are there to help us. We've got to figure out how to use it. A great example of this is in South America. They grow this thing called the coca leaf. When you chew it, it's a mild stimulant, which is less addictive than caffeine. Of course, when you boil it down and extract the ingredient and turn it into white powder and put it in your nose, then it's extraordinarily detrimental to your health. So if we knew how to use things properly, then they'd be there for us for good. The coca leaf is good. Cocaine is bad. Depends on how we use it. So the same thing is true with alcohol. Same thing's true with alcohol. Alcohol is there for our benefit, and we're meant to use it in a particular way. The question is how. Right? I didn't bring it on here, but there's a Gemara that says that that one of the words for your grape harvest, which we say in the Shema, is tirosh. Right? You've heard this? Tigan chav siroshcha. You've heard this word tirosh. Take a look in the Shema, in the second paragraph of the Shema, and you'll see the word tirosh. Tirosh means grape harvest. And the Gemara says, why is it called tirosh? Because if you use it properly, then you become a rosh, a head, a leader. You can use it to excite you and awaken you and make you more present and all those things. And if you use it improperly, you become a rash, which is a poor person, a pauper. So these things have dual uses. So we're now in our process of trying to figure out all the different clues that we need in order to know what wine is for. We know that it's connected to memory somehow, but we don't understand yet. It gladdens our hearts. It's supposed to be red, and it's supposed to be alcoholic. Okay. Now, one last piece of the puzzle, which is, if we go back and we look at the mitzvah of Zachor, it says something very specific. It says, Zachor es Yom HaShabbos L'Kaddisho. We're not just remembering that it's Shabbos, but we have to remember Shabbos to make it Kodesh. Now, what does the word Kodesh mean?
Special.
Holy. Great. What does holy mean?
Separate.
Separate. Fantastic. That's exactly the wrong answer that I want you to give me. So most people would say that the definition, the fundamental definition of holy means separate, right? Great, fantastic. So it's going to be a really special day when you meet that special somebody that you want to spend the rest of your life with. And you're going to get to that culmination where you're standing, staring at each other under the chuppah, and he's going to say to you, behold, you're separate for me. Isn't that such a romantic thing to say? You're so separate for me. Behold, harei at mekudeshet li. That's exactly what he's saying, no? You are so separate for me. That's exactly what you want to hear from the guy that you want to spend the rest of your life with, right? Yes, Chaya.
It's not just separate, it's set aside for, like, when it's like, when you have something that, like, to make it holy, like, I learned this, like, with certain vessels, like, if you designate, like, a broom only to be swept on Shabbos, and that broom cannot be used during the week, it's to, like, separate it from other things,
Okay.
to, like, designate it for something holy. So when you say you're separate from me, it's you're, like, set
Amazing.
aside for me.
Good. So the point I was trying to point out is that, yes, to make something kadosh does involve a separation. But the separation is only a middle step. Because kadusha really means totally connected, totally here and present. Every single part of you is available. There's no part of you that's thinking about your high school sweetheart or thinking about the waiter, that cute-looking guy that you saw earlier in the wedding hall, right? Every ounce of your being is here for me, and I'm here for you. And so Tosfos, in Maseches Kiddushin, when the Gemara is talking about why is it called Kiddushin at all, Tosfos says the word mikudeshes means miyuchedet and mizumenet. Totally singled out, totally reserved, totally prepared. Everything about you is here. You've brought your whole self to the table. That's really what kadosh means. Yes, it does mean that sometimes in order to be kadosh, I need to separate from other things. But I separate from other things in order to be totally present in here and connected to you. That's really what kadosh means. That's really what it means to be holy. And so inevitably, it's going to mean that I have to disconnect from all the other people if I want to be totally kadosh to you. You know, the hippie says to his girlfriend, "Do you love me?" And she says, "Yes, of course, I love everybody." Now that's not going to feel so good, right? Because that's not really what love is. The specialness of a relationship is dependent upon how unique is this relationship. If you have the same relationship with me that you do with everybody else, then you're not my best friend. And you're certainly not my spouse. So when we're remembering Shabbos, we're remembering it for a certain person. We're remembering it to be Kiddush. We're separating it out. That's the day that's unlike every other day. There's something that we have to do in order to filter everything else out so that we're only here on Shabbos. So the deeper understanding of wine is the following. Many people think that what wine does is it gets rid of our inhibitions, right? So sometimes we're more willing to say things that we wouldn't normally say on when we're sober. Yes. Yeah. Sometimes you come to regret those things that you say when you've had too much alcohol. So just a word to the wise is like, make sure you're careful with what you say. But in fact, wine does something slightly differently. So there was an experiment that was done a couple decades ago now, where people were walking into a nightclub, and half of the people that walked into the nightclub, actually, I think everybody that walked into the nightclub was given a stamp as they walked into the nightclub, and the stamp said, AIDS kills. Okay? It's a pretty heavy-handed message when you're going inside to have a good time. But this was done in the 90s when the AIDS epidemic was very, very much rampant. And one of the big issues was that people who had kind of one-night stands, it was like not a very safe thing. And okay, fine. So they'd go in, and then they would, and then as people were coming out, they would interview them, and they would ask them a survey. They would say, "How likely are you to sleep with a stranger?" Yeah. Now, what they found was the people who had been drinking more heavily said they would be less likely to go home with a stranger, and they were like, "Why is that? I thought that wine would inhibit your hesitations." And what they discovered was the following: is that when you see this stamp on your hand that says AIDS kills, what alcohol does is it creates a certain tunnel vision. In other words, whatever's in front of you becomes amplified even more. So if you're happy, you're really happy, and sometimes you forget about some of the boundaries that you had set for yourself before. But if you're really thinking about something, you will think about it even more if you're drinking alcohol. So what alcohol does is it in less of a boundary reducer and more of a zoom in enhancer. It takes whatever's in front of you and makes it totally there. You kind of forget the past, you kind of forget the future, you're completely in the present, now for better or for worse. If you drink in moderation, what it can do is it can, okay, I'm thinking about the meeting that I have tomorrow for my office, and I'm thinking about all the grosses that I have to do, but you know what? Right now we're at the birthday party, or right now we're at your l'chaim, so let's have a couple whiskeys so that I can be totally present for you in this celebration. That's in the best of circumstances. Now, why would that be fitting to use when we're talking about remembering the Sabbath to make it holy?
Because we have all the distractions of the whole week. We have to sit down and be present with our family. All our work is done.
To make Shabbos Kodesh, exactly right. To make Shabbos really Kodesh means I have to be so present that I have no other distractions, keeping me from what I'm meant to be thinking about right here, right now. We've spoken about this in the past, but this theme keeps coming up, which is that the more we're obsessed with doing things and getting things done and getting to a certain place, the less we're able to appreciate where we are right now. If I look at my spouse and I'm like, we're going to do things together, and we're going to raise kids, and we're going to build a house, and we're going to make, at a certain point, it's like, okay, fine, but but we have to stop and every now and then just have a candlelit dinner and just appreciate each other and stop the doing and the achieving, because the relationship itself can only be appreciated when we are fully present, not when we're looking forward and ahead into the future all the time. To remember that is the ability to make it holy. And so what we're doing is we're taking alcohol and we are actually recreating a very specific process that allows us to be fully present. Now, we've said before, 6 days a week you've got to work, and on the seventh day you will rest. And I think we've also mentioned before that to the extent that we are building and doing and working in the 6 days of the week, that's the extent to which we can rest on Shabbos. Right? The Gemara says, it says in the beginning of Mesilas Yesharim, one who prepares on Erev Shabbos will eat on Shabbos. That's actually a metaphor. What that really means is, to the extent that I'm engaged in the process and working on the achievement and the goals, so when I realize that I'm building up to something, in the end, when I stop, now that stopping means a whole lot more. Because now I can look back on everything I've done and say, look at us, look what we've done together. Look what we've built together. Look who we are. Look where we are right now. Now, the process of alcohol is such that you take a grape and you let it ferment over time. And in the process of time, it breaks down and breaks down and breaks down. And now when we drink that, in a certain sense, from a very, very deep level, and try to follow me here, and if you don't fully get this, that's okay, we'll try to figure it out together. Alcohol, in a certain sense, allows us to skip steps. Normally, when we work and we work and we work, and we can enjoy the simcha at the end of that work. The simcha comes only after we work really hard on something. Look, I've practiced for hours and hours and hours, and now I can play this beautiful piece of piano. Look, I've spent hours and days and months of my life working on a business, and now I can see the fruits. Look, I've spent so much time and years investing in children, and now I can get all this nachas. So usually the simcha has to come after a very long process. But if we want to kind of take a little bit of a shortcut, alcohol repeats that process. It almost reflects that process. It mimics the process of the hard work and all the effort that we put in, and now we can gladden our hearts. But we can do that just by drinking a little bit of alcohol. Now, in moderation, in the right way and in the right context, that helps put us in the mood. We can get to that point where we feel like we've arrived. Sometimes it's hard to let go of all the loose ends on a Friday afternoon and say, I really am finished. So what alcohol does is it allows us to remember the Kedusha. It allows us to come back to and be incredibly present with the simcha and feel truly as if there's nothing left to do. That's the best use of this drug, is to allow us to be perfectly in the moment and to appreciate the joy of everything that we've built over the past 6 days by stopping and simply being present. Alcohol does that by recreating this pattern of we're breaking down time, we're breaking down the process. We no longer have to build up to it. We can now jump straight there. Does anyone know the time?
12:01.
12:01. Okay, fantastic. Now, usually the way in which we appreciate things and the way we get joy, this is a very counterintuitive idea, but stick with me because this is the key to happiness. Usually the way that we appreciate things and get joy is through hard work. It's only after a lot of effort and a lot of restraint and discipline do we feel true joy. Usually if I were to ask somebody like, where do you get more joy, from chesed and overflowing and giving and loving, or from like restraint and discipline and holding back and boundaries, usually we'd say, okay, well the joy must be in the chesed. But in reality, joy comes from holding back. And you work and you dig and you work and you work and you work hard enough and you build enough and you do enough that eventually you get to reap all the fruits of that labor. And that's really where real joy comes from. Kabbalistically, they say joy comes from the left side of the Kabbalah chart and not from the right side of the Kabbalah chart. So if we're talking about the symbolism here of wine, one of the ways in which we understand how wine works is that wine is the shortcut to that really hard work, that restraint, that discipline. And that's why wine has to be red. That's why wine has to be red. Because red always represents holding back. It represents that discipline. It represents that ability to dig and work. And through my own blood, sweat, and tears, I have invested myself in something, and now it's finally paying off. And that's where the simcha comes from. So, taken all together, let's build the whole picture here, and then anybody that has questions, because I've just gotten a little bit deep, I recognize. But but if we're putting it all together, let's see what the picture is. I get to Friday evening, and I've worked really hard. I've spent the whole week busting my brain trying to learn as much Torah as I possibly can at seminary to inspire me for the rest of my life. Or I have worked so much at my job because I care about what I do. It's a meaningful career, or I'm making enough money for my family, and that gives me a lot of meaning. Or I am spending my time helping people, making the world a better place, and now it's time to stop. And I want to be able to encapsulate all of the emotion that comes along with feeling like I've really spent my time well. I have earned my keep. I've done what I've been put here on this planet to do. So how do I do that? How do I fully get involved in that? Well, the rabbis understood. They said, alcohol mirrors this process. It helps you to enhance this state of being where I'm finished. I no longer have anywhere to go. I can be completely in the moment. And that's what helps me to remember the Kedusha of Shabbos. So the first thing that we're trying to do for ourselves. The very first thing we do, right, as we sit down after we've done L'cha Dodi, we've welcomed in Shabbos, and we started this course with Hadlakas Ner. Lighting candles, we kind of said, is the first thing we do for Shabbos, but it's not the first thing we do on Shabbos, right? First thing we do on Shabbos, the first mitzvah we do on Shabbos is Kiddush. And Kiddush is going to be the thing that sets the whole scene. It sets the whole tone. We sit down and we say, okay, how do I get into the moment? I've stopped everything else. I've stopped doing everything else. Now what am I meant to be doing? Something called Kedusha. What's Kedusha? What? Totally present, totally whole, totally miyuchedes umizumenes. I'm taking every single part of my life, my intellect, my emotions, my body, and I'm making myself right here on this day when it's just me and you, Hashem, and my loved ones, and remembering what that day feels like. And the way that I do it is through wine. The way that I do it is I stare into that red wine and I say, okay, this is the representation of all the hard work and the holding back and the discipline and the restraint that I've had to show myself for the 6 days of the week, so that finally on the 7th day I can let it all out. And I can really, really be fully present. And I know we've been circling around and talking around, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing and feeling on Shabbos? And this is the beginning of the answer. This is the beginning of the answer, is, if nothing else, I'm supposed to be fully, fully present. I have probably mentioned this before, but it's worth saying again. In our generation, we have never faced such a challenge in being present, because we never ever have to be. We can just always be distracted. 24 hours a day, we can always be doing something else. I know it myself. It's hard for me to simply sweep my floor. I have to be listening to a podcast while I'm sweeping my floor, because why should I be just, fully involved? I can be entertained while I'm doing anything. So it is a challenge, and it's hard, and it feels unnatural because we're not used to it. But the first thing that we have to work on, it's almost like the template, it's almost like the operating system for the rest of Shabbos, is Kadosh. Remembering that something is Kadosh. Remembering means, actually, let's spend the next just 3 minutes, because I want to talk about what remembering actually means. Does remembering mean forgetting? Well, let me ask you this. When we stand in shul for God knows how many hours on Rosh Hashanah, and one of the big things that we do when we daven on Rosh Hashanah is we do the whole thing called zichronos, right? Which means remembrances. And what are we doing in zichronos? We're asking God to remember the Jewish people. Let me ask you, did he forget us? No. So why are we asking him to remember? What does it mean? What does it mean when God remembers? From our point of view, what it means is he never forgot, but now he's acting as if we are now front and center in his attention. That's really what it means to remember. So when I say zachor, what I'm really doing is I'm saying, place it right in the center of your attention. Place it right in the presence of your mind. That's what zachor actually means. So this is, okay, now, Kiddush should be a bit of work. Kiddush should be a little bit of work. It's going to help you, but only to the extent that you can be present as well. Because wine will take you where your mind already is. If I stop and I take a few breaths, and as I'm saying Kiddush, and I'm actually thinking about, where am I right now? I'm back at that original moment at the very end of creation where everything is done. And now Hashem is just being. I heard a very beautiful idea, which is that, why did Hashem rest? Because he didn't need to, he doesn't get tired. The answer is there's a type of rest, but it doesn't actually say he created rest, although that's true, he created rest. But Hashem himself is resting. But what it means is, in the same way that you and I can only appreciate a relationship fully when we're not doing and achieving together, Hashem decided, I just want to enjoy my creation. That's what I'm doing. That's what he's doing on Shabbos. I just want to hang out. hang out in this beautiful world. I guarantee you, whatever this means, Hashem gets pleasure from this universe. Otherwise, it would not exist. So on Shabbos, the first thing that you have to do, and this is going to be your homework, the first thing that you have to do on Friday night is you have to take a few breaths and just spend however much time that you have, whether it's 10 seconds or 30 seconds, or you want to take 5 minutes before you get to the meal, in your mind, mentally letting go of all the things that have just happened and trying to be totally in the moment, whatever that means to you. If you know how to do mindfulness meditation, fantastic. But otherwise, it really just means a sense of, I'm going to, whatever's in front of me right now, that's what there is. I don't know if they let you guys, do you guys drink wine? No.
If we go to someone's house, we can.
So if you go to some, okay. So when you guys come over for Shabbos, then we'll have a little bit of wine, and then we'll all be very, very present. But this is the beginning. This is the beginning of the platform of what happens when you clear away the space by refraining from all the malachas. Is the first thing it does is it creates kedusha. It creates kedusha. We remember that something is kadosh. We remember that we are totally and unforgivingly dedicated to this moment right here, right now. All right. Does anybody have any last questions before we head out? Ariella?
Really quick question.
Yeah.
Would that mean that, like, doing that on the weekday, would that be, like, not that, but, like...
You can be present, but the let's say it like this. Trying to be mindful and present on the week, during the week, would be good only as far as it helps you do more of what you're meant to do during the week. The 6 days of the week are there for work. If doing a mindfulness meditation helps you to work better and to be more clear for your job. One of the things we have to get out of the habit of is thinking that Shabbos is a day that helps me energize for Sunday and Monday. No. Shabbos is a day for itself. The fact that it makes me more rested for the next week is very nice, but that's not what it's for. So if we want to rest during the week, the purpose of that rest is going to be so that I can work harder. The purpose of Shabbos is Shabbos. That's it. It doesn't serve another function. Any other thoughts, questions, queries, comments, compliments, praises? Okay. This is how we begin to build that inner connection of what it means to have Shabbos. So
Thank you.
good luck.